Source. Adapted from archaic translation by W.H.D. Rouse. Jataka number 484. Sālikedāra-Jātaka. The crop of rice, etc. This was a story the master told while living at Mindriven monastery, about a brother who supported his mother. The occasion will be explained in the Sama birth. Then the master sent for this brother, and asked him, "Is what I hear true, brother, that you support lay folks?" "It is true, sir." "Who are they?" "My mother and father, sir." Said the master, "Well done, brother. Wise men of old, even when embodied as the lower animals, having been born as parrots, even when their parents grew old, laid them in a nest and fed them with food which they brought in their own beaks." So saying, he told a story of the past. Once upon a time, a king named King Magadha reigned in Rajraha city. At that time there stood a brahmin village, named Sālikedāra, towards the northeast as you go out of the city. In this northeastern district was property belonging to Magadha. There was a brahmin who lived in Sālikedāra, whose name was Kosiya, and he held an estate of 1,000 acres, where he grew rice. When the crop was standing, he made a stout fence, and gave the land in charge to his own men, to one 50 acres, to another 60, and so he distributed among them some 500 acres of his estate. The other 500 he delivered to a hired man for a wage, and the man made a hut there and lived there day and night. Now to the northeast of this estate was a certain great wood of silk cotton trees, growing upon the flat top of a hill, and in this wood lived a great number of parrots. At that time the Bodhisattva was born among this flock of parrots, as the son of the king of the parrots. He grew up handsome and strong, big, his body was as big as the half of cartwheel. His father, now grown old, said to him, "I am able no longer to go far to field. Do you take care of this flock," and committed the lordship of it to his son. From the next day onwards he refused to permit his parents to go searching for food. But with the whole flock away he flew to the Himalaya hills. And after eating his fill of the clumps of rice that grew wild there, on his return brought food sufficient for his mother and father, and fed them with it. One day the parrots asked him a question. Formerly, they said, the rice was ripe by this time on the Magadha farm. Is it grown now or not? Go and see, he replied, and then sent 2 parrots to find out. The parrots departed, and descended in the Magadha lands, in that part which was guarded by the hired man. Rice they ate, and 1 head of rice they took back with them to their wood, and dropped it before the great being's feet, saying, "Such is the rice which grows there." He went next day to the farm, and descended, with all his flock. The man ran this way and that, trying to drive off the birds, but drive them away he could not. The rest of the parrots ate, and departed with empty beaks. But the parrot king gathered together a quantity of rice, and brought it back to his parents. Next day the parrots ate the rice there again, and so afterwards. Then the man began to think, if these creatures go on eating for another few days, there will not be a bit left. The Brahmin will have a price put on the rice, and fine me in the sum. I will go tell him. Taking a handful of rice, and a gift with it, he went to see the Brahmin, and greeted him, and stood on one side. "Well, my good man," said the master, "is there a good crop of rice?" "Yes, Brahmin, there is," he replied, and repeated 2 stanzas. "The crop of rice is very nice, but I would have you know, the parrots are devouring it, I cannot make them go. There is one bird, of all the herd the finest, who first feeds, then takes a bundle in his beak to meet his future needs." When the Brahmin heard this, he conceived an affection for the parrot king. "My man," said he, "do you know how to set a snare?" "Yes, I know." The master then addressed him in this stanza. "Then set a snare of horse's hair that captured he may be. And see you take the bird alive and bring him here to me." The farm watchman was much pleased that no price had been put upon the rice, and no debt spoken of. He went straight and made a snare of horsehair. Then he found out when they were like to descend that day. And spying out the place where the parrot king descended. Next day very early in the morning he made a cage about the size of a water pot, and set the snare, and sat down in his hut looking for the parrots to come. The parrot king came amidst all his flock. And he, being by no means greedy, came down in the same place as yesterday, with his foot right in the noose. When he found his foot fast he thought, now if I cry out the cry of the captured, my family will be so terrified, they will fly away foodless. I must endure until they have finished their food. When at last he perceived that they had taken their fill, being in fear of his life, he thrice cried the cry of the captured. All the birds flew off. Then the king of the parrots said, all these my friends and family, and not one to look back at me. What sin have I done? And rebuking them he uttered a stanza. They ate, they drank, and now away they go quickly every one, I only caught within a snare. What evil have I done? The watchman heard the cry of the parrot king, and the sound of the other parrots flying through the air. What is that? Thought he. Up he got from his hut, and went to the place of his snare, and there he saw the king of the parrots. The very bird I set the snare for is caught. He cried, in high delight. He took the parrot out of the snare, and tied both his feet together, and making his way to Sālikedāra village, he delivered the bird to the brahmin. The brahmin, in his strong affection for the great being, caught hold of him tight in both hands, and seating him on his hip, spoke to him in these two stanzas. The bellies of all others are outbellied far by you. First a full meal, then off you fly with a good beak full to have you a granary there to fill? Or do you hate me much? I ask it you, come tell me true, where do you put your store? On hearing this, the parrot king answered, repeating in a human voice sweet as honey the seventh stanza. I hate you not, O Kosiya. No granary I own. Once in my wood I pay a debt, and also grant a loan, and there I store a treasure up. So be my answer known. Then the brahmin asked him. What is that loan the which you grant? What is the debt you pay? Tell me the treasure you store up, and then fly free away. To this request of the brahmin the parrot king made reply, explaining his intent in 4 stanzas. My immature chicks, my tender young, whose wings are still ungrown, who shall support me in due course of time. To them I grant the loan. Then my old parents, who far from youth's bounds are set, with that within my beak I bring, to them I pay my debt. And other birds of helpless wing, and weak full many more, to these I give in charity. This sages call my store. This is that loan the which I grant, this is the debt I pay, and this the treasure I store up. Now I have said my say. The brahmin was pleased when he heard this pious discourse from the great being. And he repeated 2 stanzas. What noble principles of life! How blessed is this bird! From many men who live on earth such rules are never heard. Eat, eat your fill whereas you will, with all your families too. And, parrot, let us meet again. I love the sight of you. With these words, he looked upon the great being with a soft heart, as though it were his leafest son. And loosing the bonds from his feet, he rubbed them with oil 100 times refined, and seated him on a seat of honor, and gave him to eat sweetened corn upon a golden dish, and gave him sugar water to drink. After this the king of the parrots warned the brahmin to be careful, reciting this stanza. O Kosiya! Within your living here I had both food and drink and friendship dear. Give you to those whose burden is laid down, support your parents when they old are grown. The brahmin then delighted in heart uttered his ecstasy in this stanza. Surely luck's goddess came herself today when I set eyes upon this exceptional bird. I will do kindly deeds and never stay, now that the parrot's sweet voice I have heard. But the great being refused to accept the 1,000 acres which the brahmin offered him, but took only 8 acres. The brahmin set up boundary stones, and made over this property to him. And then, raising his hands to his head in reverence, he said, Go in peace, my lord, and console your weeping parents, and then let him go. Much pleased, he took a head of rice, and carried it to his parents, and dropped it before them, saying, Arise now, my dear parents. They arose at his word, with blubbered faces. Then flocks of parrots began together, asking, "How did you get free, my lord?" He told them the whole story from beginning to end. And Kosiya followed the advice of the king of the parrots, and distributed much alms to the righteous men and ascetics and Brahmins. The last stanza was repeated by the master explaining this. This Kosiya with joy and great delight common and plentiful made drink and food. With food and drink he satisfied properly Brahmins and holy men, himself all good. When the master had ended this discourse, he said, "Thus, brethren, to support one's parents is the traditional way of the wise and good." Then, having explained the truths, he identified the birth. Became established in the fruit of the first path. At that time the Buddha's followers were the flock of parrots. 2 of the king's family were the father and mother, Channa was the watchman, Ananda the Brahmin, and I was myself the king of the parrots.